Hey guys, welcome to my Protection Paladin tank guide for Legion, patch 7.0.3. Now in this guide I'm going to go over your talents, your spells and abilities, your artifact, traits, and pathing choices, your stat priority, and then your tank rotation as well as a demonstration of that, and macros and add-ons you can use to help yourself out. Now let's go ahead and look at your talents first. In your first tier you're going to want to default to Blessed Hammer, and it replaces your filler ability with this 3 charge ability with a short cooldown. It kind of sends this hammer spinning, as you can see here. And every time it does damage to something, their next auto attack does less damage to you. And it can keep reapplying this as it hits things multiple times. This is a nice damage increase as well as survivability. Now Holy Shield's not terrible, but it's not as necessary anymore. We used to need it to block spells to reduce some spell damage because we didn't have any active mitigation for it. But now we do because Shield of the Righteous, which we'll get into a little bit later, does reduce all damage you take instead of just physical damage. But this increases your block chance, and when you do block, you deal damage back, and you can block spells now. Like I said, that spell blocking isn't quite as important as it used to be. The Consecrated Hammer, just not quite as good as the other two. In my opinion, it makes it so that your filler spell has no cooldown. But more importantly, all the abilities that benefit from standing in Consecration will gain that benefit even if you're not standing in it. And I've been told you can double dip on this effect, so if you do stand in Consecration with this talent, you'll get kind of double the buff from Consecration. But just having the extra damage from Blessed Hammer as well as constant mitigation from auto attack damage, which is quite significant, especially on, say, like trash pulls or a hard-hitting boss, is really, really nice. And extra block and being able to block spells as well, just a little bit better than Consecrated Hammer. Now, level 30, for survivability, there's only really one choice, which is Bastion of Light. It's a 3-minute cooldown and it gives you 3 charges of Shield of the Righteous, which is your active mitigation. And if you are trying to focus on being tankier and survive better, then this is your only real choice in this tier. First Avenger, if you want to do more single target damage, you can take this. Make sure your shield hit harder, your Avenger shield, and it reduces or increases the chance that it can be reset more often. But it only hits one target, so it cuts it down to pure single target damage. Now for AoE damage, you can take Crusader's Judgment if you need that. It makes Judgment also potentially reset the cooldown on your Avenger Shield, so thus you get more triple target hits, where Avenger Shield bounces off a couple times. So, survivability, Bastion of Light, single target damage, only First Avenger, and then for AoE damage only, Crusader's Judgment. Now, level 45, they're all CC, so you can kind of pick whatever you want, but it is good to note that Blinding Light does a decent amount of damage, AoE damage, and does Disorient, and if the adds are susceptible to CC, for example, you can kind of use it as an AoE interrupt. Sort of, a mini interrupt. You don't actually lock them out of the school, but it does stop the cast. So, generally I default to this, so a little AoE damage, a little bit of AoE CC, even though it'll break probably most likely, because damage will be going out. Repentance just not worth taking pretty much ever. It's like a polymorph or sap or hex kind of thing. Well, not so much like hex, but more like polymorph or sap because it'll break instantly on damage. And then Fist of Justice reduces the cooldown of your stun ability every time you judgment. So if you are stunning a lot, this could be a decent alternative to Blinding Light. But just that having damage there is the only ability that really adds to damage to your arsenal. So kind of default to Blinding Light here. Now level 60, you've got Blessing of Spell Warding, and this is pretty much what I default to if you need it. If you don't though, or if you need the ability it replaces, then you'll take Cavalier just for extra movement. Retribution Aura, not worth taking. It does a piddling amount of damage, and it only does damage when the enemies are meleeing something else other than you, which is pretty bad unless it's another tank, and then there's only really one target typically, so it's really, really weak and not worth considering. Now, Blessing of Spell Warding, it replaces your Blessing of Protection, and Blessing of Protection removes all the stuff, like all physical stuff, damage, debuffs, and so on. Blessing of Spell Warding is the exact same thing, but for spells, for magic stuff. So all magic damage is immune, and you protect them from all debuffs, so it removes any magic debuffs and prevents the application of magic debuffs. So it's pretty much the spell version of Blessing of Protection. So if you need that, if you can make use of that on certain fights, certain trash packs, whatever, then take this. It's really, really powerful. But if you need Blessing of Protection or you don't need that magic immunity, then take Cavalier just because you don't want to accidentally have something that reduces magic damage when there's a lot of physical damage going out, for example. So just keep that in mind. Pick whatever you need in the certain situations. Now, level 75, you've got a choice between several different survivability related talents. Now, Knight Templar does cut your Divine Steed cooldown in half, so it's a much shorter cooldown, and it gives it a little mini damage reduction, 20% damage reduction. It's only, remember, it lasts 3 seconds because that's how long Divine Steed lasts. So it's a very small 20% reduction, and it's kind of nice to have, but it's more for mobility, so to be able to use your sprint ability more often, and then it does have that little mini damage mitigation. Now, if you want more consistent healing, you can take Hand of the Protector, and it replaces your self-heal ability with an ability that has practically a little bit less than half the cooldown. I think it's 2/3 of the cooldown, actually. So it's a shorter cooldown, and you can cast it on other people. Now, normally you're not going to be because you want to self-heal and you need to keep yourself alive, but if you're not tanking, for example, or you're not taking damage for some reason, there's like AoE damage going on, you can kind of help out with the heals, which I like to do. So I like this, and it goes very nicely with Righteous Protector, which we'll get into a little bit later. But this is more self-healing. So it's not damage mitigation per se, but it is more self-healing and more consistent self-healing at that. The Final Stand is a very interesting passive. It makes it so that when you Divine Shield, which is your 5-minute cooldown, which makes you immune, but then you like drop all threat and stuff, it actually allows you to use that as a big cooldown because it then taunts everything around you within 15 yards for the duration of the shield. So that means you never lose aggro because you've taunted everything to attack you for the full duration of when you would normally lose aggro. So you can either use it as like a huge AoE taunt, which is kind of weird though because it's a 5-minute cooldown, or it's just a huge tanking cooldown. But it's a very, very long cooldown, and I kind of prefer to have more consistent survivability. But if there's something in the fight that requires a huge damage mitigation, like a huge giant hit where you normally need to pop several cooldowns, you could consider taking this and just use that instead, just Divine Shield it, because it'll still be targeted on you as it will taunt him the adds immediately. So all viable in different situations. You can play around with whatever you like and prefer and need for different encounters. Level 90, Judgment of Light is going to be your default. You throw Judgment and it puts a debuff that basically heals people that attack whatever target you judged. So it's very easy, very simple. You will be judging all the time through your rotation. Those are kind of like passive healing for the raid. Now, the bigger the group, the better this gets. But even in dungeons, I really like this, especially for boss fights. Now, Consecrated Ground, not really worth taking. It makes so that if allies stand in your consecration, they take healing every so often, and then anything that moves through your consecration that is not friendly is slowed. But this requires people to stand in your consecration, which is pretty. You can't always get that to happen, especially if you're taking like a raid boss, and then people have to move in front and so on. So it's not great, and it's got positional requirements versus Judgment of Light, which just allows them, your DPS, to kind of move around as they please and still get healing. Now, Aegis of Light is a 5-minute cooldown, and basically anything behind you, all the people behind you, or within 10 yards of you, but behind you, do take 20% less damage. So it's kind of like a raid cooldown, but if you're actively tanking at the time, it's really weird to get people to stand behind you, because behind you basically means in front of the boss. Kind of weird, kind of strange, but if you're like not tanking at the time, it could be a nice raid cooldown, just the positional requirement's a bit odd. So definitely has its uses, but generally Judgment of Light is going to be your go-to here. Now, level 100, you've got a couple choices, and I really think the choice comes down to Righteous Protector or Last Defender for tanking, for being tankier and sturdier. Now, Righteous Protector makes it so that Shield of the Righteous reduces the cooldown on your self-heal and your Avenging Wrath, your wings, by 3 seconds. So every time you use your active mitigation, you're actually reducing the cooldown of your heal and your wings, which gives you more damage and healing. So really, really nice. Gives you a very much more consistent heal, especially if you took Hand of the Protector, because it's a shorter cooldown as is, and then you further reduce it. But that's more for kind of self-healing, self-preservation. Now, Last Defender, the more adds you have, the better this gets, because every enemy within 8 yards around you, it reduces the damage you take and increases the damage you do by 3% per add. So if you have a bunch of adds, you're basically getting this huge constant damage reduction. It's very, very nice for like big trash pools or any add fight where there are a bunch of adds and you're tanking, plenty of them, thinking 3, 4, 5 or more kind of thing, because you're going to get a lot of damage reduction constantly, and you'll be doing more damage. So it's kind of a double dipping bonus here. It's very, very nice. So the more adds there are, the better Last Defender gets. It's a very nice passive. If you just want, if there's not a lot of ads like single target, or you just want more healing, then Righteous Protector is kind of your go-to. Now Seraphim, technically, it kind of could increase your survivability through getting like buffs in your stats, but it consumes up to 2 charges of your Shield of the Righteous, your active mitigation, so it kind of loses out on survivability since you're losing out on being able to actively mitigate stuff more often. So it's more of a DPS cooldown. So if you want a DPS because you don't need extra tankiness, then you can take Seraphim, and that's what it's really good for. So those are your talents. Now let's go ahead and talk about your spells and abilities. Now for your damage rotation, you pretty much only have a few buttons. Now you've got Avenger's Shield, and it's a short, medium cooldown, and it just throws a shield that bounces up to 2 nearby targets, does damage, and it silences the first target, and interrupts their spellcasting. And it's just a really nice damage, kind of, it's ranged, so you can throw it out there, and it's really, really cool. And it's got some nice cleave ability. Now Judgment, it's a very short cooldown. It applies that debuff if you took Judgment of Light, that makes people heal when they attack them, and it reduces the remaining cooldown on Shield of the Righteous by 1 second or 2 seconds if it crits, so it does get your active mitigation up more often. Speaking of which, Shield of the Righteous, your active mitigation, it's on a fairly long cooldown, it's like medium cooldown recharge, but it's got 3 charges, and you do some damage, and then it reduces the damage you take based on your mastery for 4.5 seconds. Now, if you're standing in Consecration when you use this, it actually increases the effect of Shield of the Righteous, so the damage reduction is increased by 20%, so it's really good to use this in Consecration. Then we've got your Hammer of the Righteous. Now, right now it's Blessed Hammer because I took that talent that replaces it, but it's basically a filler spell, does some damage. If you're taking a different talent here, then Hammer of the Righteous, if you stand in Consecration, becomes AoE, cleave, but normally it's just single target damage. So right now it's that spinny hammer thing, it's always AoE, and it's very, very short cooldown. So 3 charges if you have Blessed Hammer, and just 1 charge if you have Hammer of the Righteous. The Consecration, it's a kind of medium short cooldown, and it drops the stuff on the ground as you can see here, and just does damage to stuff to the enemies that walk into it, and it does buff a lot of spells if you're standing in your Consecration, so it's a good habit to get into to kind of stand in your own Consecration. After that, we've got your heal, your Hand of the Protector, or Light of the Protector by default, but right now I've got the talent. And Light of the Protector, I believe, has a 15-second cooldown, whereas Hand of the Protector has a 10-second cooldown. It is reduced by haste, and it's just a heal. It heals you based on the missing health that you have. So the more health that you're missing, the bigger the heal is. And again, if you stand in Consecration, it does more. It increases the effect by 20%. So again, standing in Consecration, very, very good. For more defensives, we do have our Artifact ability. Your Eye of Tyr is a 1-minute cooldown, and it basically does AoE damage. Same damage as Blinding Light, actually, interestingly enough. And then it reduces the damage that they do to you by 25% for 9 seconds. So it's a fairly decent cooldown. It's a pretty short cooldown as far as cooldowns go, just a minute. And it's 25% damage reduction, which is very, very nice for a long period of time. 8 seconds, 9 seconds, pretty long time. We also have Avenging Wrath, which is both a damage cooldown, but also a survivability cooldown if you use it to heal more, because you do more damage and you heal more for 20 seconds. So just something to keep in mind. You can use both ways. And then we've got your Ardent Defender, 2-minute cooldown, reduces the damage you take by 20% for 8 seconds. Doesn't seem like a lot, but if you die, or would die when Ardent Defender is up, it instead just reduces you to 12% of your max health, and then it takes off the cooldown, so it will save you from a fatal blow, which is really, really nice. And then we do have a huge 50% damage cooldown, and what it does is it basically saves your butt by cutting the damage you take in half, but it's on a 5-minute cooldown. It's a really, really long cooldown, probably like once a fight that you'll be using it, so be very, very careful when you choose to use this ability. But it's your biggest defensive cooldown. Now, we do have Divine Shield, and normally you don't really use this because it removes threat from you. But if you took Final Stand, you can use this as a giant cooldown. It makes you immune to everything, all damage, all debuffs are removed, and so on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you take Final Stand, it will also AoE taunts, but normally you just use this to remove a debuff, or if you're really, really about to die, or something like that. Then we also have a Desperation heal in Lay on Hands. There's a 10-minute cooldown, so even longer, but it just heals whoever you target for your maximum health. So however much your health is how much the heal does. So really, really big heal, emergency, like, holy crap, someone's about to die and they need to not die because they're very important to the fight. Lay on hands, kind of your emergency go-to. You got your movement in Divine Steed, 45-second cooldown, can be reduced if you take Knight Templar, of course. And right now I have 2 charges because I have the Cavalier talent. We have a taunt in Hand of Reckoning, and then we've got some utility. We've got Freedom to remove roots and snares. Sacrifice is now just a damage reduction on the person, but you do take extra damage, so be careful when you do put Blessing of Sacrifice on, because you'll be picking up the extra damage that they would have been taking, so just be a little cautious with that. And then we've got Blessing of Protection, which removes all physical debuffs and prevents physical damage on the target. It also does, of course, remove threats, so if you put it on a tank, it's kind of dangerous because they're going to lose threat unless you intentionally want to do that because you're about to pick it up or something, but just be careful with that. And again, if you took Blessing of Spell Warding, this would be replaced with a magic immunity, which is the same thing but just for magic instead of physical damage. We do have a Dispel, Cleanse Toxins, removes poison and disease, no magic effects, and then we have your Hammer of Justice for stuns and your Interrupt, your Rebuke. And that's what you have as a Protection Paladin. Now, one note for passive abilities, you do have this Grand Crusader, and it's just when you dodge a melee attack, when you avoid it, or when you use Hammer of the Righteous, so your kind of filler ability. Right now it's again Blessed Hammer, but when you use that, you have a % chance to reduce the remaining cooldown on Avenger's Shield to reset it so that you get it right away. So you will get Avenger's Shield's resets, just know that that's where that comes from, either using your filler ability here, or from dodging an attack. So let's look at your artifact traits and pathing. So we'll start here in the middle with Eye of Tyr, it's your artifact ability. And then we move down to Truthguard's Light. And now I went the wrong way. I do want to say that right now because I'm a potato and I don't remember why, but just don't, please, go the other way. And you want Bulwark of Order or Tyr's Enforcer first, and then whichever one you don't pick first, you should go to the other one second. I like Bulwark of Order because it has implications to your survivability directly. When you throw your Avenger Shield, half the damage you do is put as a shield on you, which is very, very nice. And a lot of the talents leading up to it, like Face Armor, Righteous Crusader, and Resolve of Truth, all improve your survivability, which is very cool. After that, I'd go up to Tyr's Enforcer, probably through Hammer Time and Consecration and Flame, mostly because I don't really like Painful Truth that much. It's not a huge deal. Makes you deal extra damage when you're using your Ardent Defender cooldown, but it's just not that much damage, and it doesn't help your survivability. Plus, Hammer Time kind of opens you up to different paths as well, so kind of nice to have that. And then Consecration, Longer Consecration is always good to have. Now, Tyr's Enforcer does extra damage. Basically, when your Avenger's Shield hits stuff, they kind of like explode a little bit in an AoE explosion and do damage to stuff around them. This is very nice in that sense. And then lastly, you can then slowly make your way over to Light of the Titans. I'd probably skip over Stern Judgment and Forbearant Faithful. This Judgment crit thing is not great. It's pretty low, and it does technically, if you crit, your Shield of the Righteous cooldown gets reduced more, but just not that great, those two talents, and Painful Truce. And at some point, of course, you can pick up Sacrifice of the Just if you use your Blessing of Sacrifice more often, and it will make it a 1.5 minute cooldown instead of a 2.5 minute cooldown, so makes it a much more accessible cooldown to use. So that's your artifacts kind of traits and choices. Now, of course, you can take whichever path you like, whatever fits your fancy, because you will eventually get everything. So you will have all the talents at some point in the expansion. So don't be too worried if you pick the so-called wrong path, if you want to call it that. Just know that it will take a little bit more time to get the stuff that you may want. So now let's go ahead and talk about your stat priority real brief here. Now, technically, to get the most damage reduction, make yourself the tankiest possible, you would prioritize versatility first, then haste, and then mastery, and then crits. Now, versatility is a pretty boring stat, and haste has really, really huge implications for both survivability and damage. So I kind of like having a lot of haste, but versatility is also very, very good for tanking. Now, haste reduces the cooldown on pretty much all of your abilities: Judgment, Shield of the Righteous, Active Mitigation, your Blessed Hammer or Hammer of the Righteous, Consecration, your Avenger's Shield, and your Self-Heal, Hand of Protector or Light of the Protector. So it reduces the cooldown on pretty much everything that you use in your rotation all the time. So it's kind of really, really a good stat. Now, Mastery just increases the active mitigation effect, so it's really nice for that. So it's right now 38% because I have a bunch of Mastery, but it also increases your attack power and your chance to block. So it's a pretty nice stat, but Haste is just so good because it affects so many abilities. And then finally we got Crit, which is not great. It does extra damage and heals if you crit, and it increases your parry chance, so it's got like a little survivability effect there. And of course, Judgment, if it crits, it reduces the cooldown on your active mitigation by 1 extra second, but not the hugest deal there. So for tanking, I'd recommend, the way I like to think about it is Haste and Versatility are kind of your top two stats. I like Haste a lot. Technically, Versatility would help you survive a bit better, but Haste just being so good for both your damage output, which is still fairly important, and your survivability kind of makes it like dear to my heart, I suppose. So I'd go like Haste. I would think of it as Haste and Versatility together at the top, and then Mastery, and then Critical Strike. Now, for those who just want to chase top DPS as prot for some weird reason, technically you would just go Haste, then Crit, and then Mastery, then Versatility, but I don't really recommend that right now, but that is totally up to you. So now let's talk about your tank rotation. Now, the first concept is to always stand in consecration that you've put down. So put down consecration, have it roll in all the time, and stand in it because it increases the effectiveness of your active mitigation and your self heal. So not standing in it is like giving up 20% extra damage reduction and healing. Really bad. So get used to standing in your own consecration. Now, as far as the rotation goes after that, Judgment will help you survive quite a bit by reducing the cooldown of your Shield of the Righteous, plus it gives you the Judgment of Light debuff if you're using that. And then Avenger's Shield after that, just for extra damage, or for interrupts, and also eventually when you get Bulwark of Order, for a little bit of extra survivability through the Absorption Shield. But Judgment kind of does a better job by reducing your active mitigation, which reduces a lot of damage that you take. So Blessed Hammer then becomes a filler. You can either weave it in between abilities to kind of smooth out the rotation, or just to fill dead time, but you do want those hammers spinning as much as possible, so as high an uptime as possible, so you have that debuff, that auto attack debuff, going constantly on your targets. So that's your kind of damage slash tanking rotation. Now, as far as active mitigation goes, you only have one button that does that, and that's Shield of the Righteous. And you just want to use this whenever you're going to take significant amounts of damage, or just to reduce incoming damage in general. Now it's got a 4.5 second duration on the buff that it gives you, so just keep that in mind. But basically, you do want to have the charges rolling. It has 3 charges, so make sure you're not maxed out because then you're wasting recharge time that you could have been using. And then use your Hand of the Protector or Light of the Protector when you need a self heal. Pretty simple. If you've taken Righteous Protector though, make sure if you're going to use the heal and the Shield of the Righteous active mitigation like in quick succession, use the heal first so that you can gain the cooldown reduction benefit from Shield of the Righteous. Just a minor note, but something that definitely lets you heal more often and kind of helps you out there. But basically, keep this between 1 to 2 stacks. You don't want to starve yourself on stacks in case you need it and you don't have it and you have to blow a big cooldown. But you don't want to have it maxed out because then you're wasting time that you could have been recharging it, especially if you're using Judgment too. You're kind of missing out on that extra mitigation. So that's pretty much your tank rotation. It's very similar for AoE as it is single target. You could technically prioritize Avenger Shield more than Judgment in AoE just because it hits more targets, but still you got Judgment, that cooldown reduction for survivability, so you can kind of still do the same rotation and be just fine. But basically keep Consecration down, run your 2 cooldowns, your Judgment and your Avenger Shield, and of course active mitigation as you need, and then fillers with Blessed Hammer either through the rotation like Judgment, Blessed Hammer, Avenger Shield, Blessed Hammer, and so on, or just kind of to fill dead space, and then heal yourself when you need to. As far as cooldowns go, don't forget you do have Bastion of Light if you took that, and that allows you to kind of spend all your Shield of the Righteous stacks and then refresh them to full, which is very, very nice if you need to take advantage of that, or you just starved yourself by accident, and so you want kind of a reset button for that. Now, Eye of Tears probably what I would call your liberal cooldown. Just use it whenever you feel like you need a cooldown. It's a mini cooldown kind of. It does good damage reduction, and it's on a super short 1-minute cooldown, so it's very, very nice to have. Now, Avenging Wrath, 2-minute cooldown, so it's twice as long, and it's not technically a damage reduction cooldown, but it does increase your healing and damage, but more importantly your healing, so you can heal more during Avenging Wrath. You could use it as either for more damage or for more healing, or both, depending. So kind of up to you how you want to use that in different fights. And then of course you've got your oh crap button, your Ardent Defender. Save yourself. It doesn't do that much damage reduction, but it will save you from a fatal blow. So it's really important if you're about to take a huge hit, you can use this to just kind of negate the whole thing. Even if it kills you, quote unquote, you won't die. And then you've got your big Guardian of Ancient Kings cooldown, 5-minute cooldown, so use that when you're taking serious damage and you need reduction for a long time. Alright, so here we are at a boss fight, and I'll kind of go through what I was thinking. So I'll start off with Avenger's Shield and Judgment just to get aggro and apply that Judgment of Light debuff, and then Consecration with Shield of the Righteous so I get the full Shield of the Righteous buffed damage reduction, and then a heal here just to pick up my health, Hand of the Protector it was, and then just kind of filler spells. And I actually make the mistake of Avenger's Shield before I Judgment, and I should be Judgmenting before, there's a bit of a slip there. But just kind of throw your Blessed Hammers in. I need a defensive here, so Shield of the Righteous, prevent that, that's your active mitigation. To reduce the damage there. And then you just kind of follow. Keep Consecration up now. I try to Avenger's Shield to interrupt him here, although someone else gets it. Consecration, I know he'll come back to me. He Metamorphosis, so I will Eye of Tears soon after I heal. Right here, just to reduce the damage. It's a short cooldown, and it's pretty nice. So we keep going, and I'm just Judgment, Blessed Hammer, I'll Shield of the Righteous for a little damage reduction. Now he starts the Eye Beam, so I Ardent Defender. I notice a lot of damage is coming out. And then I Avenging Wrath into Hand of the Protector, a huge heal, because I know I need a giant chunk of healing. And then back to Consecration all the time, and kind of a defensive here, so Shield of the Righteous. And you just kind of react to stuff. So you're using your cooldowns to react to what you need. And I used Bastion of Light just recently to run up my charges of Shield of the Righteous, so I could survive better because I know my healer was about to die. And that's pretty much it. It's kind of a very simple damage rotation followed by how you use. So how you use your active mitigation and heal is kind of going to determine how well you survive. Alright, now as far as macros and add-ons, I don't really use any macros right now. I don't find anything that's worth kind of pairing up. Now add-ons, I've made some weak auras here, and I use weak auras, and I have a video on how to kind of make these, but you can just see I just to track cooldowns right now, and on like things like Eye of Tear, your heal, and then tracking stacks and the cooldown of Shield of the Righteous, so I kind of know like what's available, what's not. And you can do any number of things, all your cooldowns, like Avenger's Shield, Judgment, Consecration, so on, your big cooldowns. You can use whatever you want to kind of make trackers, or for things like the Judgment of Light debuff, and so on. But generally, that's pretty much all I use. There is that add-on, I believe it's called Doom Cooldown Pulse, that shows like stuff that flashes in the middle of my screen to kind of use if I haven't set up weak auras, just to kind of, oh hey, something's up, you know, something's off cooldown. But that's all I use pretty much, so that's it for this video. Hopefully you found it useful, hopefully you liked it, and if you did, feel free to hit the video with a like, and if you want to see when I post new videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.